Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Microsoft Flight Simulator in the TBM-930. And today we're going to be taking a look at VOR navigation and also using a VOR to land the aircraft. Now, I'm no professional, I'm no pilot yet, but as I learn, I like to share it, and I figured this is one of those things that would be kind of helpful because I know VOR can be one of those confusing things. This is also information that's going to be included in the next release of the TBM-930 guide, which we'll be releasing before the end of this week. So I figured I would make a video and share that with you guys. If you're interested in learning how to fly the TBM-930, check out the links down in the description below. You have a PayPal link and a Patreon link. And what you can do is, if you choose PayPal, donate $10 or more to the channel, shoot me an email at overkillsimulations@gmail.com. Let me know you're interested in the TBM-930 guide. This is a full tutorial guide, walks through a cockpit tour, as well as a complete full flight from Salt Lake City over to Denver, Colorado. Everything you need to complete this flight is in the guide itself. It also doubles up as a G3000 guide, as the TBM-930 uses the G3000 avionics suite. It's extremely detailed, should cover just about everything that you guys need. Additions coming this week are going to be VOR navigation as well as the RNav approach, as well as a couple of fixes from previous documentation that I had incorrect. But it's very, very thorough, and if you're interested in flying the TBM, I think it's a great way to start. Anyway, so moving on with today's video. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to talk about what VOR is. VOR stands for Very High Frequency Omnidirectional Range. Now what that means is basically it sends out a frequency in all 360-degree directions that can be used by the aircraft as a guidance to follow back in. Okay, now you have three different types of VOR. You have VOR, which just display a bearing, basically just give you bearing information, tells you what direction it's at. You have VOR DME, which gives you distance measuring equipment, is what DME stands for, which obviously gives you the range and bearing to that VOR. And then you have what's called VORTAC, which is VOR and TACAN. Now, TACAN is strictly used by the military. We don't use it in general aviation or commercial flight, at least not that I'm aware of. But I'm going to walk you guys through what a couple of the different symbols are here. So I'm going to hopefully remember to zoom this in on the video, and so I'm going to try to keep the cameras relatively still as I can. But this object here is this sort of pyramidal shape with the bold ends there. That is a VORTAC, okay? So that's the VOR with the TACAN, okay? And then if we scroll over a little bit, here is a VOR with DME. You can see it's got that octagonal shape, the dot in the middle with a box around it. Okay, that's how you know it's a VOR with DME. Okay, so that's also going to give you data measuring equipment. Now, I don't think I found just a plain old VOR. Here we have a VOR here. I don't, oh, yep, this is a VORTAC as well. You can sort of see it right there underneath the label there. Now, one of the things you might want to watch out for is one like this. This one has VOR DME, and it's actually labeled, okay, titled there. But there's no icon that I've been able to find, no indicator of where that VOR actually is. So we're going to assume it's obviously at the airport for, well, yeah, it's going to be for Silver City. But we don't have anything here, you know, there's no visual reference other than the placard here telling us what the VOR frequency is that I've been able to find. I'm doing one last check around. They're typically pretty nearby the frequency center, or the frequency listing, excuse me. But I don't see one here. So you may run into that as well. So keep an eye out, not just for those icons, but watch for the actual frequency information, because that may tell you as well. Let's scroll up a little bit here, see if we can't find another one just for reference. Truth or consequences, there's another VOR. but I don't see... Again, this is another one where I don't see the actual icon of... Oh, nope, there it is right there. There's a VOR. So yeah, you guys got the general idea here of how to look for these. There's another just VOR DME station. Again, there's that octagonal shape with the box around it. Here's another VOR DME. And so you can find them. They're really all over the place. It's amazing how many of them are really out there. There's another VOR. Here's another VOR. VOR seems to be the most common. VOR and VOR DME. So I imagine the older stations are probably starting to be phased out and don't really exist much anymore. Maybe out in the rural areas, but such a weird word, rural. So now let's talk about what we're going to do today. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be coming out of Tucson International here out of my hometown. And we're going to be using the VOR to navigate. We're going to be basically what we're going to want to do is intercept these frequencies on a specific bearing. So we're going to be using the 0908 course line. Now I have these offset from the VORs themselves on purpose. I didn't want them directly covering it. But we have our course line. So we're going to be using a 0908 course line, for example, for this first one. We're going to want to make sure we actually intercept it, approach it at 0908. And then shortly before interception, I'm going to change that course line. Actually, excuse me, that's not incorrect. We're back here. On a 075 course line is what we're going to want. And then as we approach, as we get close, we're going to change it to 0908. That way we come up to our next course line accordingly and tune into the next frequency. And I'll show you guys how that all looks as we get to it. And there may be better ways to do this if you guys know of any, especially you pros out there. By all means, speak up. I'm not... You know, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I'm all about learning too, and I learn just as much from you guys as hopefully you guys learn from me. But so let's go ahead, let's get into the aircraft, let's get it started up, and we'll see how this flight progresses. Okay, so jumping into the cockpit here, we're going to do a real quick startup here. We got our crash bar up, batteries on, generator set to main. Ignition can be on or auto. Auxiliary boost pumps to on, not auto. Fuel selection to manual. Autopilot trims are off. Oops. Let's turn those pulse lights and nav lights on. Let everyone know we're getting ready to start the prop. Give a nice shout out of clear prop. Actually, excuse me, before we do that, you need to make sure air conditioning is turned off. Heat source is set down to the floor. Bleed pressure switch is down to off. Initial separators off, pitot heat's off, landing gears down in green. And make sure fuel selection is obviously set to one of the tanks, and throttle is in cutoff, flaps are up. Alright, now we can go and give it a nice shot of clear prop. And come up top. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi on that starter. Let's close that door, it's going to get pretty loud here. Oh, got a little lag going on, come on. Give the door a lock, green for lock. Clear the caution. Was looking for 13% on the NG, go to low idle. We'll be waiting for 53%. Basically wait for that white number to turn green. We can move it over to flight idle. Oops, I bumped it. That was my fault, guys, didn't mean to. Went to readjust in my chair and hit it. So started a little early. It happens. Alright, now let's come back upstairs for a second. Let's see here. Auxiliary boost pumps to auto. Ignition left on auto. Oxygen comes on before anyone says anything. It's in the pilot operational handbook. This comes on engine start. And go to fuel selection to auto. Autopilot trims to on. And we can go ahead and turn the taxi light on now. That's fine. Okay. So, let's get our air conditioning turned back on. We are in the desert. Inertial separator on for taxi. Pressurization switch set to max diff or auto. I recommend auto as that's going to be most comfortable for your passengers. And stall and pitot heat warnings will wait until we are airborne. Alright, and I think that's pretty much it for what our purposes are today. So now let's get into configuring the VOR for our first intercept. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to come up to our nav source. And actually want to make sure that's on nav 1. And then now we need to configure the VOR. And so what we're going to do is go to our navcom, go to our radios, and we're going to select our first VOR frequency here. So, I never noticed all that stuff below there. There's our ADF frequency. Interesting. Music. Huh. I don't know what that is. Interesting. We'll have to play around with that later. Sorry, I just saw that and was like, wonder what that is. Anyway, so let's configure our first frequency. And if we come back to our VOR stations here, we're going to go to our first waypoint. We're coming out here first. And so we're going to be looking for 115.4. Let's come in here. 115.4. Drop an enter on that guy. And we can also transfer it to the active. Okay? And you can see it identifies it SSO. And we should see the same thing here. So San Simon SSO. Or San Simon. Alright. And so now, if we come up to our VOR, now it's because we are down on the ground, so it can't see anything yet, and that's something that we have to be considerate of is range. But we have the frequency set in, we have the nautical miles set in. Now we also want to set in our course, and our first course, we said was 075 degrees. So we'll set our course needle up for that attack. There we go. And now we'll go ahead and clear our master caution from the inertial separator. Let's bring on some lights for a second. There we go. And we're good to go. Alright, let's taxi out. I'm not going to worry about my head tracker today, so we'll just sort of deal with the weird camera angles for a minute. Once we get airborne, it'll be a mood issue. Okay. So let's release that parking brake, and let's get her rolling. Oh, hey, Bill. Get out. This plane is so unbelievably fun to fly. If you guys have not started flying this one, highly recommend it. I say it all the time. It's like a Lamborghini in the sky. By the way, if you guys can hear a weird humming noise in the background, I do apologize. That's my 3D printer going. I've got some... It's actually printing parts for an enclosure that I'm building for it, so it should shut it up in the future. But I've got some prints in mind that sometimes take a day or more to do. I've got a buddy of mine who is, through watching his stuff... Oh, I should probably set the altimeter. Who has set his stuff up in a way that... 299 or 4. 299 or 4. He's basically making an F-18 cockpit, but just the forward console, at least that I'm aware of at the moment, is just the forward console. But they got the UFC panel and forward knee panel and stuff, and it's just like, all right, got me going. And it got me thinking about some really cool radio stacks that I want to make for the Bravo throttle quadrant. It's got the spots on top of it, and there's digital panels that you can order online where they're plug and play, but it's just the digital screens with the knobs. Strobe light, landing light, check, 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 and takeoff flaps. Anyway, so they're really slick looking, and so I want to print a frame for it. And that's the thing, they don't come with any kind of mounting equipment or housing for it. It's literally a screen, digital screen with the knobs, but again, they're plug and play. And so I thought that'd be really fun to make like a radio stack, a custom radio stack to go on top of the Bravo throttle quadrant, or even on top of the Alpha flight yoke. They both have the mounting holes for it, so it'd be kind of fun. Alright, so line up. Alright, so takeoff. Let's get rolling. Yaw dampers stay off until takeoff is complete. Takeoff power set. Sorry if it's a little loud, I'll turn my speakers down and once I get airborne here. There's our rotation speed. And the beautiful bird comes to the air. Flaps up. Start trimming for takeoff here. I did finally listen to you guys and made some changes to my mouse configuration so I can actually use these without zooming in every 2 seconds. Alright, let's turn those yaw dampers on. Let's set our altitude. I know we're turning for a minute, won't be for long. Let's go to 10,000 feet. Alright, and now let's turn our flight directors on. Let's turn our autopilot master on. Let's set our flight level control. 134 knots, and let's set our heading. And so now alright, so I'm gonna show you guys here a second. We just picked up the SSO. We just had to get airborne and get up in the air for a minute, high enough to receive the frequency. We're 84 nautical miles away, and so now it's time to start looking at receiving our path here. Now, the thing I want you guys to be aware of here, I need to change my heading here. Get you turning, girl. Is this is our course line. Okay, this is the course deviation line. The objective is to get this green line in the middle here so it makes one solid green arrow, or whatever color arrow or indications your VOR are. Okay, so what we need to do here, you can see we got a slight tailwind, almost right on the money. It's actually not bad. We're going to have to adjust for the wind a little bit, but it's probably going to push us over just a little bit. But so we want to adjust our heading in a way where we intercept this course line. Alright, so what I'm going to do is sort of turn us at 060. Well, let's go a little bit further than that. There we go. Let's do 050-ish. There we go. And then we're going to watch as this course line begins intercepting the aircraft. And as it starts intercepting to make one solid line, we'll turn us back on a course of 075 degrees and then adjust as we need to make sure we keep this straight on. Alright? That's basically it from here. VOR navigation is pretty easy. The autopilot makes it significantly easier to manage it. Climbing like a rocket. By the way, I want to thank the gentleman, if you happen to be watching this one, who told me to clear my DirectX cache. That resolved my stuttering that I've been experiencing since World Update 4. So guys, if you have any questions on how to do that, here, I'll actually show you real quick, because that's a big one. It really made a huge difference for me. So what you want to do is find your C drive, assuming that's where Windows is installed. It should be C drive. You're going to right click and go to Properties. When Properties comes up, it'll look like this. So find your C drive, right click, Properties, and you're going to go to Disk Cleanup. Now it's going to come up and check that, and you want to make sure you check this box right here, DirectX Shader Cache, and then hit OK. That, for the most part, I get a stutter here and there once in a blue moon, but a huge difference. Such a huge difference. I was getting super frustrated previously. Now, I haven't tried it in the A320 yet. The A320 is sort of a beast of its own, so keep that in mind. But definitely made a very, very large difference. Alright, so we're approaching that Mach 0.3 speed. And so as we're continuing to travel, as I said, this green line is going to start coming closer and closer and closer to the aircraft. Okay, so you guys can sort of see now how it's coming in closer. Just about there. So as we're approaching that line, I'm going to start turning us back towards 075 degrees. And you can see I'm a little off. I turned just a hair too soon. So for example, from here, all I would do is maybe go like 070. And that's if you want to be like nitpicky, perfect, on the money, you know what I'm saying? Which I've been accused of being a perfectionist before. Alright, so we temporarily lost our VOR signal, so I'm going to go ahead and go back on 075. And we just lost it because of range and altitude and obstructions, right? See, now we got it back. Mountains, things like that, those are all things that are going to be impacting it. So what we could actually do if we wanted to make this a little bit easier, is let's go ahead and increase our altitude a bit. Let's go up to, say, 15,000 feet. And let's do flight level change again. And let's pull that down. Gosh, this plane's a screamer, man. And so we're basically right on the money now. So what we're doing here is we're basically now following this line right here. Okay, that's our course line that we had plotted out. Now, instead of it, well, actually, sorry, it's this line right here. This one here. Make sure I grab the right one. Yes, okay. And that's going to take us, but what we're doing instead of, you see how we're offset here, that's not what we have set up. We're going to fly 075 degrees right through the center of this VOR. Okay, so ignore the offset here. That's just what I did that so that way you guys can see the VOR signals. But what we're doing based on what we have programmed in the computer there is we're going to be aiming right at it, but we're going to come at it on the 075 radial. Actually, I guess we'd be coming at it from the, what would that be, 250 radial. But so, I think from here, how did... I could have sworn I turned all those off. You know what I don't think I did? Oh no, they're locked. Alright, cool. So from here, I will catch you guys as we get a bit closer. We've got quite a bit of distance to go now, so I'll see you guys when we get to the next turnout. Okay, so real quick, we're still a ways out, 41 nautical miles out, but I want to show you guys what's happening here. We're getting blown off course. Now, what's a little odd to me is based on our wind direction, according to this, you know, it's sort of coming at us from the left side here. It should be pushing us this way, which is pushing the course line to the left, but instead the exact opposite's happening. So that part doesn't make exactly sense to me, but unless it's pushing the tail to the right, causing the nose to go left, I guess that might make sense. So you may run into these situations, in which case you just have to do just like you did before, and this will happen occasionally, especially if you get into worse winds than this. Just adjust your course. And what you can do is, depending on your wind and how consistent it is you can set a consistent course. It may require some trial and error, like for example, I've set here 081, let's do like 078 degrees and see if it doesn't straighten out. And you may be able to just hold 078 degrees and that should counter it enough where you maintain course. Alright, so we're approaching our VOR, our first location here. A little off course, not too bad. Sort of trying to adjust it like I was saying. I'm at 077 heading here, looking for 075, trying to compensate. I had a tailwind coming in from the right hand side here that was pushing me the other direction, so not a big deal. So I'm just kick us back on the normal heading here. We're at 6 miles out. And so now what I want to do though is I want to change my course to the 0908 degrees, so that way we make the turn at the right location. So we're going to go 0908. And I'm going to come down and start setting in our next VOR. And our next VOR frequency is 111.2. So we're just going to come right down here again. 111.2, and we go ahead and hit transfer. Now this one seems to have a bit of less range. So if we don't pick it up in the next mile or so, what I'll do is revert back. I'll show you guys how we compensate for that. It doesn't look like we're going to pick that one up yet. So I'm going to actually stay on the one we were on. Maintain that course heading. And there it is. So now we're going to change our heading. We just passed over it. You can see this needle here, the blue needle, indicates the direction of the VOR. And so I'm going to keep coming right for a second to realign that course line, and we're just going to fly the reciprocal from it. So I know that might be kind of hard to see. So this blue arrow right here is pointing to the VOR itself. This is the tail end letting us know that we're flying away from it, and this is again just our course line that we discussed before. You can see our distance to it is increasing. And so we can fly this for quite a bit. So we're coming back. So I'm going to start turning us back. And we can travel this for quite a minute. And what we can also do is tune the second nav radio. So 111.2. Throw that up there. And then what we can come up here and do is, if we go to our PFD settings, is bring up bearing 2. Should have brought that up. There we go. Sorry, so you see nav2 data here. I was looking in the wrong spot. I was expecting one of these to come up. And what we'll see here in a minute is when we acquire this signal, we'll see it come to life, and we know we can switch the VOR signal. Like, let's set this one, for example, to nav1, and we have that same data down here. And so now we're on our right heading, so let's go ahead and turn it back to 0908. And actually, I'm going to stay on 100 because we've got a 2 knot tailwind coming up from the cross, though. It's going to be pushing us to the left a little bit. So I'm just going to sort of let it ride at 100 and see what we come up with. And so I'm just going to stay on this course for right now until we get our second nav data. Okay, so it took a minute. We're at, it was about 50 nautical miles, but we finally got our data for the next VOR. So now we can take this, switch over to VOR 2. And we need to set the course for VOR 2. So again, that was 0, 9, or 8. Oh, helps if I do that correctly. Okay, and so you can see we're sort of off course here. So I'm going to bring us back to the left now. And we are 36 miles away. And so I'll be playing the same game as before, just waiting for our course line to sort of come in closer. And now our next leg will take us to a heading of 355 degrees. And now that you're on the path, once you're basically established on your path, you can actually change it. Like, I could change it to 355 now if I wanted to, and that would put me on the correct course line. What you'd have to pay attention to is your VOR indicator needle, verifying that you're looking in the right direction. So it's actually right here, making sure that you understand that whether or not you're ahead of it or behind it at the time that you reach your course line. So as long as you have a good idea of what your positioning is, that's fine. So for example, let's go ahead and do that. Let's set this up to where we intercept it right now. So let's turn this to 355 degrees. And so from this point, we're not going to be concerned about staying on the course line of 0, 9, or 8. We just want to get to this course line so we can turn north and head towards our next waypoint. Now, the thing I can tell you right now, based on where the course needle or the VOR needle is, okay, you can see here, if you see what's going to happen as we get closer and closer, this arrow is going to come this way down further and further. So I can tell you right now that as we make our turn onto our course, we're going to be ahead, however many miles this states, of the VOR. So we're going to be X amount of miles. For example, if when we approach this line, this is 10 miles away, the needle's going to be back over here. We know that we are 10 miles into our next leg. Okay. So we'll do that, and I'll see you guys in about 25 miles. Okay, so I took a second and paused the simulation so you guys can see what I was talking about. So you can see as the VOR needle pointed towards the south, our course line fell very quickly. It happened, that's why I had to pause it. It happened within a matter of seconds. It started dropped very, very quickly. So we can ascertain from this that we're currently 10 miles, almost 11 miles north of the VOR. So we're 10 miles into or 11 miles into our next leg. So as I unpause, and actually I can just do this from here, I'm going to go ahead and set our heading before we unpause to 355. Okay, and when we unpause, you can see that we are going to come off course. You know, we're a little ahead of the game here. And you can see how far they pick up. I mean, we're still picking up that SSO VOR too. So it really depends on the strength of the station. Now, we're going to turn our heading more like 347, 345 for a minute until we start intercepting that course line again, get us relatively back on course. But what we can do now is program the next leg into VOR 1. And that is going to be 108.6. So let's come back to VOR 1. 1086, give it a transfer, and then we're going to do the same. Oh, we picked that one up already. Oh, that one's close. Is that really that short of a hop? Oh yeah, it was only a 36-mile leg. So at this point, we'll just change on over to VOR 1, and we'll set our next intercept. The intercept for this one's going to be 297 degrees. So back to course 1. Not sure what the fast way. I don't think I picked the fast way there. Well, that's working well though. That works out. All right, so 2907. And again, at this point, it all depends on what your goal is in the navigation. Is there a specific reason why you need to really ride that course line, hit the VOR, then make your turn? Or can you have that 11 mile, 12 mile deviation from the course line, and as long as you hit the relative points and get to where you want to be, you're fine, right? So it all depends on what you're aiming for while you're flying. If you want to specifically fly over that location, then you want to make sure that you keep your course line until you have actually reached the VOR, basically until the distance comes close to zero. Now keep in mind vertical distance as well, right? So for example, we're at 15,000 feet. We're almost 3 miles up in the air. All right, that distance is going to be accounted for in this distance. All right, so it's not, you can't just think of it on the lateral distance. You got to think about that vertical distance as well. Okay, because that does come into play. You can be, if we were directly over the VOR right now, we would be just shy of 3 miles. I mean, you figure a mile is what, 5280, right? So anyway, so that's something that I'm going to take into consideration here. So really, at about 5 miles ish, we should see this line start falling very quickly. So we're going to be turning to 2907 here pretty quick. What I tell you, about 5 miles, it would start coming down. So let's start making our heading changes. Almost got that one. Went a little past, but not bad. Okay, and so from here again, it's just a matter of figuring out what the next VOR station is. So now we're going to Silver City, so 110.8. Again, I'm going to use VOR 2, 11. Nope, went too many. 110.8 transfer. And we picked it up, so we can switch over to VOR 2. And this one, we're going to go ahead and let us come right at it. I want to fly right over the VOR. So we're going to stay on the 2907 course line for now. Okay, and you can see we're a little off there. So I'm going to bring the aircraft a bit left. Maybe fly 290 or so for a second. And we got about 35 miles until we get there. So I'll catch you guys in just a bit. Okay, so another thing I want to show you guys real quick. The closer you get, the further this deviation line can be, okay? Because there's less room for error at the larger distances or the shorter distances. Okay, so I was trying to compensate. You can see here I had some crosswind. I was trying to blow myself left here and then ended up in an evil spot there. But we're basically going to still fly right over the VOR station. So I'm going to go ahead and unpause here. And now it's time to get ready to turn at 245 degrees. So I'm going to set my course line. Wrong one again. Oops. Was it 245? Yeah. And so this one's probably at a higher elevation, which is why it's just now starting to come towards the aircraft. You can see it there. But it's still showing. The needle shows it right in front of us. You know what I want to try to do? I wonder if I can manipulate I've never even tried this before, so I don't know if it's going to work. I'm just going to see if we can actually see the VOR station. I'd imagine... Oh, that might be it right there. I don't know if that was supposed to be it or not. Well, that might be it. I think that's it, but I can't tell with some of these textures. They're just not refined enough, so it's hard to say. Anyway, I was just curious. Thought that'd be kind of fun to look at. Alright, so let's unpause. We're only 2 miles away from it, so... Maybe vertical distance isn't calculated. I thought it was. I thought it was supposed to be. But we're starting to turn. There we go. So we actually lost it now. So I'm going to go ahead and steer our heading to 245 degrees. Oh, there it goes. It was right after we came over top of it. That's why we lost it. And so now we'll set the next one. And like I said, you know, I'm still learning myself, so I'm not perfect by any means with this. But I'm starting to get the hang of it and figured I'd share that with you guys. So now at this point, we just need to switch back, to 115.4. At this point, we'll take it back home. Switch to VOR 1. And we'll set our course for 1. .245. Let's bring our heading. I'm going to bring it pretty strongly to the left for a minute. And this one I'll skip. So this is basically the first waypoint that we went to. So what I'll be doing from here is once we get to SSO here, is I'll be tuning in the Tucson VOR, and we'll be using that to line up with the runway. Alright guys, so we are approaching the Tucson VOR. See the frequencies 1160 here. Now we're going to be coming in on runway 29 right. So what we need in order for this to work with the VOR is if we take a look at Sky Vector first off, we can see that the VORTAC is right in front of the runway. And that's how TACCAN can be used. TACCAN is used as a guidance source also for landing on the runways. And how they do that is by positioning them in a way that, you know, they're in line with it. So what we need to know is we need to know the runway's final heading for 29 right. And you can see here, it's 308 degrees if we pull up our Navigraph. So I just went to any approach, 29 right, and found the runway heading. So our runway heading is going to be 308 degrees is our final heading. Let's expand that, see if, make sure that I had that right. Oh, it looks like final heading is 303 degrees. Sorry, that's something different here. Yep, final approach course 303 degrees. Okay, so we're going to come around. We want to set this now, our course, for 303. And this one we're going to want to follow pretty closely. So we're going to set it now. That way we can line up with the runway on the approach. All right, so from here I'm just going to start our descent. Very shallow descent, given how that nice mountain range in front of us. But we're going to start bringing the aircraft down. So that's at 2,400 feet. Now, the other thing that you lose that's important to remember is we're not going to have any vertical guidance, right? This isn't an ILS or an RNAV, right? This is totally up to us. What we do have is a DME. We know at 20 nautical miles, we should be at 8,000 feet, okay? At 13.7, at 7,200. That's what this D stands for, is distance. Okay, so our distance from the VOR, we're going to be using that to try to match up our altitudes as best we can. Now, again, I'm still practicing this myself, so probably won't be perfect, but hopefully you guys get the idea. as I'm descending here, I actually want to show you guys another neat trick. So if you're worried about this distance here, maybe you're worried about getting too soon of a closure rate, not having enough time to prep for the landing, you can also turn your heading to make it more of a perpendicular attack to the course line, which will reduce the closure rate, right? The more perpendicular you turn, the less distance you're going to gain on the VOR, and it's going to be more of a perpendicular flight, and then we turn in final, and that will open this distance up on your final turn. Okay, just wanted to throw that out there as I was coming to the approach. Alright, so we're coming up on 15 nautical miles away. At 13 and a half or so, we're looking for 7,200. Flying very perpendicular to our course line here. And you can see that VOR needle coming around, so we know that it's going to start happening. So I'm going to start turning us towards 303. Try to get ahead of that turn. And again, as these two needles start to close, you know your course path is going to come down. Alright, so we can see based on this, we're actually a little low, or a little high. So I'm going to increase that descent. Because again, at 13.7, we're supposed to be at 7,200. Oh, went too far back on the throttle. Here's that course line coming down. Our next one's at 5.5 miles. She's looking for 4,700 feet. Alright, so now we're going to turn 303. It should put us right in line with the runway. A little off. Turned a little late on that one. But there's our runway. Let me see if I can get us lined back up. Set us down to takeoff flaps. And now we're descending too quickly, so I'm going to bring that nose up. And we'll see this course line up with our runway here in a minute. Make sure we're set here. Yeah, got those on already. Good, good. All right. And just sort of watch the relationship with the course line to the runway here. So again, 4,700 at 5.2 miles. Alright, start turning that back to 303. Increase that descent. And you guys certainly got it from here. I mean, from here, as long as you stayed on that course line, didn't deviate, you could almost use this all the way down. And remember, I'm taking my altitude information here from the approach plate. This is what I'm watching. And again, there's the distance information and the altitude obviously listed below. So from here, we'll just land our aircraft. Let's get that landing gear down. And we got that wind here blowing us a little off. Again, it's blowing us in the wrong direction. It doesn't make sense. If the wind data here on the G3000 is correct, then we're getting pushed the wrong way. We should be, the course line should be getting shoved to our left wing, especially with a headwind like that. Tailwind, I was thinking, well, maybe it was actually, I suppose it, I don't know. All right, so one of you pros, I need you guys to tell me, one of you real world pilots here, someone with experience. I got two schools of thought here. My one school of thought is if a crosswind like this on the headwind is going to push the nose to the right, then the course line should be following to the left side of the wing. But then, I guess, if the force is strongest on the tail, which I guess that makes sense, then the force on the tail would push the nose to the left, in which case that would push the course on the right side. So it's just a little confusing for me. Alright, so our distance at 2.5 miles, or basically there. 2.2, we should be at 3,600, so yeah, we're just under the glide slope, which is what we're showing. So it's pretty good. So from here, I think we're just going to take over and do a manual approach. Yaw dampers off, autopilot off, my plane. And I'm stalling. I hope you guys have enjoyed this tutorial. Hope you found it at least useful and maybe cleared up some confusion that you may have had about VORs and how they work. I know I don't need to be doing this right now, but just like one of those things. Fly the plane! I always have these space shuttle landings. I don't think it's something that's ever going to go away. My dad had it in real life. It's how he did his approaches. It's just one of those things I think I'm just going to have to learn to deal with. It works out for me. Oh no, the stuttering's back. I was just so happy. That's heartbreaking. Everything went so smooth after takeoff. Alright guys, well, once again, I really hope that you guys enjoy this. I hope you found something useful out of it. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below if I missed anything, if you know any better tips and tricks, or anything that, like I said, that I would have missed. And as always, folks, stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye, folks.